This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, we are inching closer and closer and closer to hitting 100,000 downloads this season. I believe we can make it happen.
I really do. Thanks to our audience, we can make it happen.
Well, before we head into our conversation with Juneteenth, what does it mean to be black and free? Let us thank each of our listeners and viewers. Thank you for listening to us on the various podcast apps and for watching the actual live recording of the podcast on our YouTube channel. We are grateful for your support, your encouragement, your feedback, your reviews, and your comments.
You know, every episode I say a tsunami of thanks, so I want to break it down to the audience today. I say a tsunami of thanks because you have made a difference in our lives. And you have been a blessing to us. And it's in an ocean of podcasts to listen to, you listen to us. So this is why I always say a tsunami of thanks.
And thanks as well to our phenomenal producers, Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Indeed.
June 19, 1865. 2 years, 5 months, and 18 days after the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, slaves in Texas finally learned that they were free. Known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Liberation Day, Emancipation Day, and most commonly Juneteenth, it took Union General Gordon Granger and the General Order No. 3 to proclaim freedom in Galveston, Texas, along with 2,000 federal soldiers. Since 1866, Black folk, particularly those with an embodied generational memory going back to Texas, have been commemorating that day ever since. And here we are in 2021. And this raises the question, Irene, what does it mean to be black and free?
All right. Well, you know, interestingly enough, Emmett, I had to sit down and really think about this, particularly in 2021. So let me tell you, I have some mixed emotions. Sadness, pride, and fatigue. But let me tell you about the sadness, because you had opened up with, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't set us free. That was 1963. The Civil War, which ended in April of 65, didn't set us free. We have Juneteenth that then set all enslaved blacks, quote unquote, free. Reconstruction didn't set us free. And then we can hit into certainly the civil rights movement with those various legislations that has been certainly, you know, passed. So the thing that upsets me is that I think of a particular speech by Frederick Douglass, who was 1852, where he says, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? Because the real truth is, when you're asking me, what does it mean to be black and free? The real Independence Day is really Juneteenth for all Americans, because July 4th, even though we celebrate it, we also celebrate it separately in our unique ways. So again, it's so important, I feel, to have Juneteenth as a national holiday. But what I'm just proud about, I should say, is the tenacity for us to keep saying what Langston Hughes wrote about, what every poet, what every artist has said. I too sing America. In the face of the constant obstacles, we still have this tenacity to say we too are Americans. It just absolutely amazes me, because the real truth is, we're in America, even 2021, and George Floyd's death was supposed to be an inflection point for us to do better. Literally, where can your black body, Emmett, where can my black body as a black queer woman be and be free?
Yeah, I mean, this is deep. We go from, and you laid out much of it, you know, Jim and Jane Crow laws in the late 19th and early 20th century, which were trying to reduce that sense of freedom. We had to fight during the civil rights movement for what was already entitled to us. And even today, as we see the division and divisiveness within this nation, particularly over can we teach Black history as American history? Of course, we're using other terminology to say that, but the real critical question is can our Black and brown children learn about themselves within the notion of being contributors to this great nation? And
Absolutely.
that's a challenge. So you mentioned Frederick Douglass. That was July 5th, 1852. He was speaking to the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society there in the Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. And he asked that phenomenal question: what to the slave is the 4th of July?
And it
Juneteenth is everything to us.
That's right. But it resonates, though. It resonates in terms of the way in which we have a segregated history. Now, what bothers me about this is that we have conservatives today that are quite upset about teaching critical race theory, but have no problem about, teaching, critical Confederacy theory. I mean, because again, we are still paying homage to Robert E. Lee. We're fighting about his statue being torn down. I mean, we got all of these Confederate statues that have just populated the nation. I'm troubled by the very fact that what do we do given the fact that we can't even combine the truth about what has happened to not only Black people, but every disenfranchised person in this country. That's what when I think when Frederick Douglass, and he's speaking to women, because again, you got to realize that when we talk about the July 4th, it didn't really include women. They were fighting for the vote. So he was right to do some kind of coalition building with women on not only being franchised to vote, but he also understood that he's not free unless women are free. And so I really don't quite understand why, when we talk about the July 4th, we don't bring up everybody's history, because I think if we did that and talk about Native American history, we could have a much more forceful kind of push to include all disenfranchised people in American history. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know what it means to be free in America, because for me, free at this point is a kind of Afro futuristic image, like we saw in, what was it, Wakanda, the Black
Hmm.
Panther,
Hmm.
or it's something like what Stevie Wonder is going to do, and Du Bois did do, was he went to Ghana. I don't know. It reminds me of when I was reading Isabel Wilkinson's novel, The Warmth of Other Suns. Do you remember that point where the doctor is trying to find where's that line of demarcation where I can cross over and I'll be free? I'll be a free man out here in the Midwest. I don't know what door I can go through, Emmett. I don't know what road I can take. Okay? I can't get any more degrees. I don't know what it takes to be. I live in a white neighborhood, not by choice. That I need to say that. I don't know what it takes to be free. So you tell me.
Well, I don't know either what it takes to be free, but I certainly know that every time Black folks make a little progress, it's almost like somebody pulls you by your collar and holds you down. And I think in this sense, particularly in 2021, as we're looking at, voting rights, as we're looking at, our
Mass
ability to
incarceration. Yeah.
participate in the democracy, we're being pulled back. Our assets are not as valuable as those of other people. We're being maliciously incarcerated, exponentially above other people, and we're being murdered and killed by folks who are officers of the state. And
To
so,
protect us.
you're
To
right, who are
protect us.
supposed to be protecting us.
Okay. But Emmett, do you notice this though? This is what I've noticed with all these sort of legal cases here, where the cops have wronged our brothers, where they have been killed, and it has fallen down that yes, you have done damage to this person. Our government, and more importantly, our police officials would rather pay the settlement, which
Yeah,
is in millions of dollars,
yeah,
than to change the laws.
yeah.
Come on now.
I mean,
Rather do that. So that tells us,
that tells
and
us.
I mean, yeah, that
Yeah,
tells us is that your life means nothing. We will pay you. You will go. You will go away. We would. I mean, they don't even mind being bankrupt, financially bankrupt. Okay,
it,
because morally they're already bankrupt.
it says a lot I'm going to say a lot right now. We still want justice for Breonna, by the way, right?
Oh,
So
please.
let me just put that out there. But it also says this. The great comedian back in the 90s, Robin Harris, when he's talking about babies, kids, remember what he said? They
Baby's
don't
kid.
die, they multiply. And the beautiful thing about what I'm going to say is black resilience does not die, it multiplies. And I'm conflicted because I really don't want to have to be resilient. I just want to be a human being. I
That's
just want to
right.
live my life. I want to, make sure that my family's taken care of and I'm able to do the things that citizens in this nation do. However, I am saying that black resilience does not die, it multiplies. Our last episode, we talked about Tulsa and the various massacres. There are so many things going on that we need to make sure that we continue to hold fast to the dreams and the visions of our ancestors, and that we continue to manifest the things that we know we're able to do. So we must keep hope alive.
Alive.
We
Yeah,
must
but
keep
we
hope
do
alive.
that. We do that, but there's a level I have to say that you get fatigued by this here. I mean, really, because one of the things that I keep asking, can we have whiteness without supremacy and without a white lash? The real issue here is this. When we look at today's Congress, listen, we want to get that voting bill passed. We want to get the George Floyd bill passed. We want the John Lewis bill passed. It's not happening. I think that what we have to really understand here is that there really is two Americas, and that we have to, in many ways, build a Tulsa, build a Black Wall Street. I mean, that is the God and honest truth. Because even if you go to these Ivy League schools, come on now, we're graduates of it. We are treated as second class students. So the real issue is that where's there a place to be free? We have to make it, and unfortunately, it might mean a kind of segregation.
Well, we're going to come back here because we got a whole lot more to talk about. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and we will be right back.
I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
That was the voice of Danny Glover reading Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast. We're back. Irene, wow. The
Yeah,
words of Frederick Douglass are so on point, not just for 1852, but for 2021.
yeah.
We are not included.
No, it resonates. And when I was saying that, I think we might have to self-segregate. What I mean by it's like the other day we had our Pride event here in Boston, and we had a Black trans march, largely because as Black LGBTQ people, we weren't part for many years of the larger dominant Pride. Boston Pride this year is 51 years old. Many of us have been at every one of those prides. I mean, at some point, you have to say, okay, I get the message. I'm knocking at the door. I serve in your military. We're really actually good citizens because we actually hold America to its ideals. We're the only people that really believe in those ideals. That when they talk about the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. I love what Martin Luther King said in 1963 during the March on Washington, when he says here, America has been given a bad check. We've come, okay? I mean, because of insufficient funds. And he's talking about, civil rights as well as monetary, issues that we're still being plagued with today. So my point is that I, 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 I very much want to be incorporated, but at what expense now? At what expense do we keep asking to knock at the door to be let in? And as I said, they rather pay us out than to change any kind of laws here. But the thing that I like about us, when you said hope and tenacity, we celebrate these holidays. I love the way I used to have our church celebrate watch night,
Mhm.
Eve. And what that was that's the eve of right before that's celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation coming in on January 1st, 1963. I love the fact that we celebrate Juneteenth, because if we don't celebrate, that slavery has ended, then who will? Considering, again, we see all of these Confederate statues, splattered all over America. Really?
I mean, you raise a great point. I mean, the whole notion about watch night service, which many people think is New Year's Eve
Right.
church for black folks, it literally was because when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, I think in September of 1862, it did not go into effect until January 1, 1863. So black folks stayed up all night, and what did we do? We went
Well,
to church
that's
to
right.
give thanks to God for what was about to
A new,
happen.
a new day
And on
dawning.
January,
That's
a
right.
new day dawning, on
That's
January 1,
right.
1863, there's freedom, except for our beloved in Texas. You know, what's interesting is this. When we think about Juneteenth and we think about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day,
Mm-hmm.
Juneteenth is a commemoration of the freedom of all black folks, and it's still not a national holiday.
That's
I
right.
mean, we know how much campaigning it took to get, what we now kind of call MLK Day. But let me say this about this too. It's interesting that in white spaces, MLK national holiday is supposed to be a day of service.
Right.
Like black folks can't even take it off
Take a
because
break,
it's the
right?
day that we're supposed to give of our community service and do labor. And
Right.
in many ways, Juneteenth, although it's just now really coming into popularity in certain spaces and places, it's also being seen as a day of service. So, like the very day
That's
where
right. There
black
was
folks
so
can have the day off and have a paid holiday,
right.
we're supposed to do community service as if
That's
we
right.
don't do that every other day
Well,
of the year.
the interesting thing when you talk about, Juneteenth here and stuff, it's like, so people have been always wondering, so why 2 months after, Texas, finally, enslaved population become free? And for a whole lot of reasons. And I think it becomes a metaphor to me in terms of what happened January 6th here of this year here. We're still fighting the Civil War. So that while in April it was officially announced that the Civil War had ended, you still had Confederates still fighting, still fighting this Civil War. This Civil War is still here. And what happens is the reason why Juneteenth is important and why Watch Night service is important, because if nobody recognized that, we have been emancipated, nobody will. Because one of the things I've noticed here is I always say this, that while, the North has won the war, the South has won the narrative, and they keep perpetuating the lie about it. And so my point is that if we're going to talk about when we get to July 4th of this year, we need to tell the truth that yes, 1776, we still had slaves. The forefathers of this country that said all man is created equal came up put in the Constitution the 3/5 compromise. So again, the question is, and I'm really serious, I think sometimes when people leave this country, like W.E.D. Du Bois, and Stevie Wonder soon to do so, did Lincoln have an idea when he set up the ACS Society, the American Colonization Society, where he wanted us to go back? Was he signaling to us, other than colonizing Africa, was he signaling to us in a way that we didn't know? You ain't got a chance here. You ain't got a chance here. I always wonder about that. He was always somewhat, provisional about our emancipation. Was he signaling to us? And were others signaling to us? This ain't ever happening, because the very fabric of this country, the very fabric of it, is built on enslaving black and brown bodies.
I think the moment that we realize that this hopeful articulation of the American dream, the land of milk and honey, was really articulated for some, as you just said, and for others of us, we were never supposed to make it out of the kitchen.
That's right.
Right? We were never supposed to
fields.
make it
Yeah.
to sit at the dining room table.
Right.
And we learned that in many ways through popular media, and unfortunately, as you mentioned, not only does the South get to control the narrative, but non-black people get to control the narrative too, even in movies. So you have foolishness like Django Unchained, or you have all kinds of things, that kind of try to kind of mock at these moments in histories. I'm so grateful for shows like Blackish. In 2017, they had a whole episode that really focused on Juneteenth. The show Atlanta in 2016 also had an episode that dealt with Juneteenth. And one of my favorite writers of all time, Ralph Ellison,
Oh
one
yeah,
of his unfinished novels
it's
was
Juneteenth.
was Juneteenth,
And
which was
Annette,
published in
you know that
1999.
Annette Gordon Reed, who's written numerous material and books on Thomas Jefferson and his slave mistress,
Hmm.
Sally Heming, has a book out on Juneteenth talking about it. It's no more than 160 pages, folks, so it's a quick read, talking about how Juneteenth became so important in her state of Texas, and the push now, the very push that Sheila Jackson, who is a native Texan, wants to make this very much a national holiday. But let me just say this. We got Martin Luther King Day. We're getting all these holidays. I call this symbolism without substance here. I mean, the point is that when you got, critical Confederacy theory operating, in Congress, I don't know how you push the dial. I don't know how you open the door. I don't know what you do here. And so I'm at a standpoint. I'm very glad for Black Lives Matter because they're our,
Hmm.
Black Panther movement of my era. I'm
Hmm.
very glad for a younger generation. But when I echo, Fannie Lou Hamer, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, there is a point I would like to, have the warmth of other suns.
Yeah. Well, on the same note that you're saying, I am so grateful for our young people, particularly those who are millennials and post
Yeah.
millennials, because when you look at photos that are of the civil rights movement marches, and then you look at photos that are of the Black Lives Matter marches, there's something peculiarly different in those photos. The ones about the Black Lives Matter march have everybody in them. They have black folk, they have white folk, they have Asian folk, they have Asian Americans, you have
They got
Latinx folks.
smartphones.
You got I mean you have a cross section
Yeah.
of what I believe the citizenry of the United States of America should look like. And so I'm grateful to our young people because in ways where our two generations, and we're of different generations, but in ways where our two generations may have failed to push the dial forward, these young folks are saying enough is enough.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for them.
Did we fail, Emmett? I just feel like they stand on our shoulders. I mean, when I look at my generation, I'm proud to see you. You've gone further than I could. I mean, I think one of the things, and I'm not trying to, excuse my generation, but we were the first to go in an aggregate number, in a critical mass, to go to these schools, these white schools, to get the best white supremacist education that money and scholarship can provide to indoctrinate us against ourselves. Okay. But my point about it is that you are my child. I'm
Mhm.
old enough to be your mother. So my point is that I think then, as the age of your mother, I can then tell you what path to go and not. I mean, we were on a journey without a roadmap. I
Yeah,
do think that each generation stands on the other.
I agree with you. Maybe I shouldn't have said that we failed, but I think that we need to rethink the methodology. We need to rethink the direction. And I think that the whole notion of meritocracy, it's not there. I think the whole notion of exceptionalism is not there for us. When we are fragmented and when we are not together, we fall prey to anything. So I think the whole notion of building stable, strong communities and being in it to win it, which means economic development, which means nurturing one another, which means providing resources and opportunities for one another. I think that that's where it is. But you know what? Enough about what I think. Why don't you offer us a closing word
Yeah,
for this?
thank you, Emmett. This was hard. This was hard, but I love the fact we do benedictions because it really cinches me. So this is what I want to offer up here: that if we are to hold America to its ideals, do not make America normal again. Make it better. We must tell the truth about what America has been in order for America to become what it can be. We must acknowledge each other's history as American history. We must be bold and courageous enough to chart a better future for ourselves and this nation, one that leads towards the dignity and sanctity of all human life. Let not our fears be exploited, our fragilities exacerbated, our divisions widened. Let us remember this, that the longing for democracy is also the longing for change and social justice. As a nation, may we become more like the people we want to be than the people we have been. That said, we need to take responsibility for our mistakes. We need the ability to be greater than our fears and larger than our hate. Because the moral and spiritual challenge before us is this. Together, we can stand as a United States of America, or divided we will fall as a petty people. Ashe,
Ashe.
and amen.
Amen. All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music from this episode is from Reverend Price's son, musical prodigy, Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH.
Additional thanks to Bob Kempf, Elizabeth O'Brien, May Heath, Chelsea Mers, Meredith Neerman, and Zach Waldman.
If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
And feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment at allrev'duppod@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of All Rev'd Up.